Thank you. Welcome, everybody, to this joint meeting of the Bend City Council and the Warm Springs Tribal Council. I'd like to start just on the dais here, just going around and just introducing ourselves, our name and our position, so we know who everyone here is. So if you want to go first, Councilor Franzosa.
Regina Franzosa, I'm the city councilor.
Nick Pachwai, Lakshwaniksha Sitwala, English name Carlos Kalika, just allowing the land to recognize the Indian name here on our ceded lands. Serve on the Tribal Council for Warm Springs Simnasho District.
That's Bend City Council.
Mike Riley, Bend City Councilor.
Ray Moody, Vice Chair, Warm Springs, Simnasho District.
Melanie Keebler, Mayor of Bend. Oh, you just talking to it. Yep.
Jefferson Green, Wasco Chief, Confederate Tribes of Warm Springs. Happy to be here.
Megan Perkins, I'm a Bend City councilor.
Lincoln Football, Simnasho District.
Megan Norris, Bend City Council.
And Steve Platt, Bend City Council.
So once again, thank you everyone for being here. We had an opportunity to sit and share a meal just before coming out, which was great to continue to connect and enhance this government to government relationship. I'm going to hand it over to our staff now to introduce themselves and start us off on our presentations.
Good afternoon, Eric King, Bend City Manager.
Bobby Bruno, Confederate Tribes of Warm Springs, Secretary Treasurer, CEO, and then Itaki Wigwa.
We have an agenda printed out in front of you. We'll also just cover it here on the screen for those that are viewing. Our intent is to cover 3 topics, starting with an update on ongoing collaboration between the city and the tribes regarding the Deschutes Basin water resources. We'll talk about roundabout art, and then we'll close with talking about the sovereignty acknowledgement or declaration of sovereignty. And there's a copy that's also printed in front of you when we get to that item. So really, without further ado, I want to introduce Mike Bittner, our Water Services Director. I believe he's going to be joined with Josh Newton, and we're going to launch right into that status update on nation's water.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Bend City Councilor. It's good to see you again. Tribal Council members, welcome. Great to have you here. My name is Mike Bittner. I'm the Water Services Director. Josh, let's see, quickly go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Josh Newton, one of the tribe's attorneys.
All right, and let's see, y'all know Bobby. So we've got the controls here. So we had 3 items to touch on today. And for the item on ongoing consultation on Deschutes Basin water issues, we really wanted to break this up into 3 updates for all of you today. We're happy to answer any questions, but we have about I think 20 minutes carved out for this item plus Q&A. So we have really 3 updates. One, we wanted to just talk about the recent progress or work that we've done to review the City of Bend's recent water right transfer applications with the state. There's a detailed process there that allows the tribes the ability to review all water rights transfers in the Deschutes Basin. And our 2 groups have worked together over the last several months to do that, to review those and come to some milestone steps anyway to allow us to move forward. The second item we wanted to touch base on was some preliminary discussions on how we think we might be able to improve the Deschutes Basin Mitigation Program rules. So the Deschutes Basin Mitigation Program is a pretty complicated program with the Oregon Water Resources Department that allows municipalities, groundwater users to use groundwater as long as they're working with other surface water users in the basin to put surface water back into the river. Okay, this is a pretty complicated program that we're going to carve out time at a future opportunity to really dive into and hopefully create a workshop in this series of meetings where our staffs work together to create some updated language heading into either the 2026 or the 2027 legislative session. The idea being that if cities and tribes are both supportive of some updated language to the mitigation program, that it has a much better chance in the Oregon State Legislature in the next few years. But we see an opportunity and for some collaboration in that area. And then lastly, again, sort of aspirational, we in the Deschutes Basin are one of the most well-studied basins in all of Oregon, and we really want to keep it that way. But our science is aging, it's getting out of date. And so the last 10 to 15 years have been pretty challenging for all of us in Oregon, especially the Deschutes Basin with the extreme and exceptional drought that we've all experienced. Updating our Deschutes Basin science to really get some updated modeling to inform our decision making is something that I know Josh and I have spoken about a few times. We know that there's some willingness for both of us to come together and figure out what that looks like, who does that work, and what do we really want to know on top of what we already know. Okay. So those are the three things that we really wanted to talk through here today. Josh, I'm going to keep this kind of more conversational as far as an update with the leadership group here.
Yeah.
Feel free to jump in here. I explained a little bit about the
Then
city's.
I will.
Okay, all right.
I just, thanks, Mike, and of course we have Bobby here too. I wanted to pause a little bit and frame it just a bit. So the ongoing consultation around the Deschutes Basin water issues is we're all here today because city council and tribal council met, came together and developed a memorandum of understanding, which I think in the tribe's experience is the first time something like that has happened, and probably in the city's experience as well. And from what I'm hearing around the basin and other places, everybody wants to know about the City of Bend tribe and Warm Springs tribe MOU. Say, well, you got to talk to them. But really, the idea is to get once a year councils together, and in the interim for staff to work on issues of common interest. And water's been top of the list. And in addition to the water right transfers, I think on behalf of the tribe, we want to thank the city. They hosted a tour of your Outback facility. Some of us made it. And I found that actually really fascinating and interesting. And we've also begun this discussion about water right transfers. So Deschutes Basin, there's more water right transfers on an annual basis than anywhere else in the state. And yet the Deschutes Basin is also where the Warm Springs Reservation is. It's where it's within the Warm Springs ceded lands. And it's an area where the tribe has treaty reserve water rights, both that are pertinent to the Warm Springs Reservation. Those have been settled. And then there's also treaty reserve rights to in-stream flows in other parts of the basin. And that creates a really complex management paradigm. And just speaking as one of the tribe's lawyers, I just want to be appreciative of Mike, Lori, and of other staff who've taken the time to sit down and work through these issues with us, because the competition for water, the scarcity of water is only increasing. And these sorts of relationships I think are what the tribe believes are going to get us through. It doesn't mean we'll always agree. It doesn't mean we always have agreed. But I know that I learned a lot from the City of Bend. And one of the things I've taken away, and I told Mike this as he and I were prepping for it, your water conservation program is really fascinating to me. So you have these on paper, these water rights to theoretically use a significant volume of water, but you keep sort of adjusting that demand curve based on your water conservation policies within the city. And I think that's a leadership position, and it's really a great tool that a lot of people just aren't that aware of. And well, personal note, I had a leak in my landscape system last year, and literally I didn't know about it because it was on the backside of the house, and I got an email. And I'm like, what is this? I started walking around my yard, and then there's this giant pool of water. And so we got it fixed like that. And then I got an email this year that said, hey, we noticed this issue. We're happy to come do an audit of your system. And so I think the City of Bend is really at the forefront of that. I think that is really, really important about how to wisely use water resources of the basin. So anyway.
Yeah. No, thanks, Josh. I appreciate you jumping in. That's a product of our leadership and our council's leadership, kind of continuity of leadership, with Eric being a proponent of conservation for the last few decades. So I think we're pretty focused on that. And like Josh said, all of these things, you kind of work together in terms of water in the basin. Nobody gets to do anything on their own. And you kind of have to work together with your fellow basin stakeholders. And getting the opportunity to really get a layer deeper into this relationship with the tribes has been really enlightening and eye-opening. Bobby, you can attest, there's been a long history of the tribes working closely with cities on water issues over the last two decades plus, right? But over the last 6 months, we've had an opportunity to meet with your staff, Josh, some of his team, 4 times, tour some of your facilities, have you at our facilities. And I gotta tell you, every time we get a chance to interact with you and your staff, our staff start to look at water a little bit differently. It is bigger, broader. It is a little bit more about the ecosystem and fish habitat, more so than sometimes we get focused on with our operations and our water rights and transfers and things like that. So in terms of bringing our two groups together and sort of expanding our knowledge or looking at water different ways, I think we're succeeding in that area in our initial steps. Josh, do you agree?
I do. I do. Yeah, I do. And maybe the final point on water right transfers, there's a lot of discussion happening in Salem right now. There's, I think, 3 different bills pending. There's a governor's bill, there's on water right transfers. And I participated in a meeting yesterday on water right transfers. And one of the messages that I pointed out is, and we've talked to the city about, is Confederated Tribes, this is consultation, it's government to government, that they are co-manager of these resources. And so the state has a regulatory role, but so does the tribe. And the way that we begun to share it is the Deschutes Basin has waters of the state and waters of the tribe sort of commingled within the basin. And it isn't for the state to tell the tribe how to manage the waters of the tribe. And we have to find a way to coordinate and cooperate together. The problem is we always talk about antiquated sort of water technology, that we talk about canal lining or different sorts of conveyance mechanisms that were developed and constructed in the 19th century. But another antiquated sort of component of the infrastructure is the legal framework, that it was developed in the early 20th century with the 1909 Water Code, which was less than a decade after the U.S. Supreme Court case came down, U.S. versus Winters, which established, it recognized the federally reserved water rights for tribes. Yet the Oregon Water Code ignored that decision, and to this day, Oregon statute ignores the presence of tribal water rights, except in limited circumstances. And so you're sort of working through at a state level, trying to figure this out. At the same time, there's more demand on the natural system, and it's complex. And that, again, I guess bears repeating that without these sorts of MOUs where people can actually begin to build these relationships and collaborative processes, it would be very, very difficult.
Yeah, just to add on what's been said is, this resource is very important to us. We just had a meal with you and there was a blessing for the meal, and we talked about water in that blessing. And we do that at all our meals. Having an MOU in place and for Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs over the years is, there's a lot of education that we're doing and helping the city and others in the basin understand our concerns, what's important to us, how we're connected to the water, the spirituality, and how important that is to us. And then also looking out for the water. We're downstream from everyone. So we hear that from our community a lot. Yeah, we're downstream, what's in the water? We want to have good, clean water. So we're doing a lot of education here, probably even more so in the last few years than we have, to try to get folks to understand the tribes and what our concerns are and what's important to us, and what we're looking for and how we're looking, and how we can also do this in partnership, in collaboration with others, to be able to meet the needs, our needs, but also the needs of others and our neighbors here. So this is an important step, and this is unprecedented for us to be having an MOU with the city and be able to talk about these type of issues that we all deal with.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bobby. Thanks, Josh. I think we're going to keep moving unless there's any specific questions around number 1 here. Otherwise, we can come back at the end and have an opportunity for some quick Q&A. I think we're doing okay on time.
Okay. Yeah,
Okay.
go ahead.
So the second item here, again, I touched on it in our kickoff and our intro, but the Deschutes Basin Groundwater Mitigation Program has been a really important program for cities, tribes, in-stream interests for the last couple of decades, and we're coming up on some pretty critical deadlines. The program is set to sunset in 2029, And we're at a cap, a 200 cubic foot per second cap of total allocation, which we're pretty much already at. So those deadlines and those thresholds are put in place for a good reason. 20 years ago, we wanted to dive into this new program and we wanted to have some bookends to be able to review, is the program working? Should we continue this? Should we tweak anything? Should we end the program? And we're really getting to that point now where we want to make some decisions, or we want to have some certainty with what's going to happen after 2029. The reason that's so important for cities, I'll start there, and I would like Josh to expand on sort of the mitigation program and the benefits for it sort of seen through the tribal lens. But for cities, this allows the use of groundwater, and it negates the negative impact that occurs in the Deschutes River, which is a wild and scenic river. Okay, and so this program was created 20 years ago to allow cities to continue to explore mitigation groundwater and acquire additional groundwater rights, so long as they're putting an equal amount of water back in stream and doing good things. And so in general, the program is working, but I think everybody, the cities, tribes, I think if you spoke to some environmental groups and other irrigation groups, they would all have an opinion or two about the mitigation program and some things that they'd like to tweak or see changed. We want to start that conversation and quite frankly, lead that conversation as cities and tribes. At some point, this will become a bigger, broader conversation with all of our fellow basin stakeholders because it impacts everybody in the basin. But we really want to start that conversation and really start that with a series of workshops, a workshop, something that you all could attend as leaders and could devote the time to, and our staffs as well. But then groups like Josh and I, staff, could break off and really put some pen to paper and come up with some draft language to really reflect the things that we want to see change with the program. There is a report due to the Oregon legislature in 2026 on the status of the mitigation program. And we think it's important for us to be able to incorporate in that report that we're working together on these solutions, on what might work. So that's about as far as I wanted to go into the mitigation program. I'm happy to share some more detail. I do have one more slide, just sort of a 101 slide. Otherwise, I'll skip over it in the interest of time. But Josh and I think through our conversations over the last few months have realized, wow, we really need to get in the room together. One, to flesh out what this series of workshops or meetings might look like, and then to actually do it and find some time that would work for our two groups. So Josh, you want to add to that?
Yeah, just briefly. Thanks, Mike. Maybe to provide some context, I know some in the room know this, maybe everybody in the room knows this, but the groundwater mitigation program is based on the assumption that virtually all of the groundwater in this part of the basin ultimately becomes surface water at or near Lake Billy Chinook, that the hydrogeologic formations of the basin is such that if you're groundwater pumping in this part of the basin, you're going to have some quantifiable impact in the lower Crooked River, the middle Deschutes. The White Chutes is a little bit different geologically, at least parts of it. And so the idea is that those surface waters are already over appropriated. And then if you're applying for and obtaining new groundwater permits, you're actually pumping water that was already in the stream, and you have to mitigate for that. The general notion that makes good sense, and the tribe has been supportive of the mitigation program, which was really focused around the state scenic waterway flows. And it's, I think, worked pretty well for that purpose. What the tribe would like to see, and we're going to have conversations about, though, are we don't think it does a good enough job to deal with localized impacts. So in addition to water being the first gift of the Creator, as Bobby was explaining, and as they had the invocation for lunch, one of the top priorities for the tribe is the reestablishment of treaty protected harvestable populations of fish in the basin. And the tribe is very concerned that the groundwater resource actual measurements, water levels, well levels in and around Redmond are not behaving as they would be predicted by the model. And we're worried about the combination of canal lining with the additional space of HCP, additional groundwater pumping, actually catching people by surprise and having potentially a material impact in the Crooked River. And so we want to get ahead of that, which is why we were really pleased that Mike expressed support for the idea that we put together a small group and think about it for the balance of this year and try to come forward with something we could put forward to the Water Resources Department for its report to the legislature next year and be ready for the 27 legislative session. We are sensitive to your need to plan in 2020. You don't want to be pushing this to the 2029 legislative session, but I think we've got enough time. Which leads maybe, and I would just jump to the third
Yeah,
item, which is
sure.
the science. I think an area of broad agreement is the science for the groundwater resource in particular is a bit outdated and incomplete. And I think this is a broadly held view for people who think about water a lot. But there's not a consensus about exactly what to do about it. To update the science is expensive, and you need to be thoughtful about what questions you want to have answered and how to do it. I think that there's some good discussions happening in the Deschutes Basin Water Collaborative Groundwater Subcommittee. But I think the tribe, City of Bend, and some other organizations, there's going to be an opportunity to really lead and say, we need to do this. We need to figure out the funding so that we actually have the tools to allow us to move water around the basin in a way that doesn't inadvertently harm, the people that are here, including the tribe. So,
I think that's a great spot to end. I think we shared a lot of information and happy to circle back on any of the three items that we've covered. We've covered a lot of territory, but any questions, Mayor or council members or tribal members?
Questions, folks? Councilor Platt?
Just if you were to have a budget to do the groundwater science, do you have an idea, just rough order of magnitude, what it might take to make it happen? I'm
not
not
yet.
gonna hold you to it.
Not yet, but I think we will in short order. There's people that are beginning to frame up what needs to be done and then try to put some dollars to that. But it's going to be at least hundreds of thousands of dollars to do it.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Yeah. It seems like this small group work could help produce some sort of estimate or sort of plan for what that might look like and then give us a number to go see where we could find that funding. Right?
That's the idea.
Yeah.
One other layer of complexity is just the uncertainty at the federal level. Groups like USGS have been common partners in these kind of efforts. Who's available and got capacity to help lead that effort. Be impartial is of concern.
And that groundwater study was USGS. Study.
Our original.
The original one.
Yeah.
And that was how long ago? Well, that one, the last set of studies completed.
I think the original study was 99. And then in 2017, there was an update to the GS flow model. And then there's a surface water. That's one of my views, Mike. I'd love a one sheet for the non-technical folks to be able to say, this is exactly what we have available to us.
Yeah.
Because I get lost in the sea of acronyms. for sure.
But the easiest way to think about it is when they first did it, it was very large scale. And right now we need it down to fine scale.
Right.
And that's what our hope is, because we really need that data to understand what's going on.
The geographically finds.
Yeah.
What's happening in these locations.
Okay. Great. Any other questions or comments from anyone? Okay, well, thank you for all that information. I'm really glad that this is a example when we signed the MOU with that great picture up there, and I've got the pen here that we signed it with. Our hope was that it was not just a piece of paper, that we would actively work together and achieve goals or talk about our shared concerns. And so I see this project as the first example of how we're doing that. And I am really proud that our staff have been able to do that and keep going. I think it's great. So,
Thank you.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Next, we are talking a little bit about roundabout art, which we had brought up at a previous meeting.
Yeah, so this is also something that I think generated a lot of interest and a lot of, I think, opportunity for us to really recognize the cultural significance of the connection between the city and the tribes. So we'd like to explore the idea. We have a roundabout art program here at the City of Bend, and we'll talk a little bit more about the process. But we would love to see if there's an opportunity to install art. In terms of locations, we have been talking with our partners at ODOT and looking at the Cooley or Roble, which are kind of gateways into Bend as potential locations. So that's Highway 20 and Cooley and Roble as locations. But Josh, anything else you wanted to say in terms of us teeing this up before we talk about process?
I don't think so. I would ask Bobby if he did.
We talked about it the last time we met and talked with the council members after I did my presentation to you all and we are really looking forward to doing this. And so I think figuring out how to do it is going to be our next step here that Eric's going to talk about.
And I think we want to look a little deeper than just a native artist, but also really talking about a concept that really reflects the what we're trying to communicate, what we're trying to share, some of the history. So we're going to be really thoughtful about that. So I think this is one where we want to take our time to do it well versus something that's expeditious and might miss the mark. So I'm going to have Renee, there's a lot of words on the slide, but I think just to talk about the process, because it is pretty intense that we have established. I think we can always adapt, but this is something to kind of center us on creating a good outcome towards at the end of it.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon. As Eric said, this is a proposed process. We can certainly change as needed. But the first step is really to identify a work group between both councils and staff to define the project scope. So what do we want to accomplish? A budget, timeline, and location, like really look at all the locations and determine what is best. The next would be to develop a call to the artists. So we would create a detailed call or plan. Hello, I love talking about art with you right now. That would have a project description, eligibility, submission requirements, selection criteria, and a deadline. And then we would advertise the call. Right now we work with Art in Public Places and they use a platform called Cafe where they put the call and then that is distributed to arts organization, artists across the country. So we could definitely use that platform as well as through social media, newspaper ads, etc. We want to make sure that we have a wide reach so we can attract a lot of different artists. And then we would develop a selection committee. And that selection committee would review all of the submissions based on the criteria. Then we would select the artists, which is really the fun part, and look at the proposals that best meet the goals and the criteria. And then we move into the contract and the planning, as well as looking at implementation. Where are we going to place the art? Working with the city staff on, and ODOT, of course, if we work with them, on the implementation, the installation, looking at safety, closing road, etc. And then documentation and promotion. So making sure that we document the artwork, that we archive it, take photos, videos, and then talk about the partnership between the two councils.
Great.
So I think we're really open to your ideas on this concept of a work group. And if there's folks that you would recommend, we're ready to get started and start following this, where we can, as I said, adapt it to your needs as well.
And I would add here on your advertisement for call that it says local papers, get it into our local paper, the Spilly Eye, our radio station. And so our community and our artists can have be able to see it there. So.
And Renee, can you clarify? I can't remember. Is there compensation to the artists for the art through this program with Art in Public Places?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
Right. Okay, great. Yeah. So council members, any thoughts? One, I would love to hear about like the location that's been recommended, if that sounds good, or if there's other ideas you have, and then other thoughts about the process. Yeah.
Yeah, traveling across this country, attending Native American events and ceremonies and going to different towns where they've implemented roundabouts. Each community has almost like a welcome to the city theme. You go up to Prineville, up to the top there, and you're going out to Burns, and they have that big cowboy with the cows and everything. And you go to other places, and when we had the first meeting down in Warm Springs, it was something to depict our people. Maybe having a big fish scaffold in the middle of the roundabout, or you go through the Dalles and you see the salmon, the steel salmon that are on the bridges, the water, those things that could be implemented throughout town. Taking pride in murals. You know, we've had Warm Springs community members paint murals within the community, and it depicts our story, shows our history, our story. If you've been to Smith Rocks, you'll see the petroglyphs. Chief Polina and others that have occupied that area. You know, there's a lot of petroglyph that tells a lot of our story as well. So, you know, to see something, you know, within the roundabouts that honors the First Nation people, the Warm Springs Nation, and those that have occupied the area in a way, you know, that would be very wonderful. Columbia River, they have totems that Toma Villa has up in Vancouver. That's almost like welcoming in the salmon, the water, honors our food gatherers. So he carved out a totem that honors our way of life and our people. And you come to Warm Springs, you see the murals. As soon as you come in, you see that Shell station right off the right side. One of our tribal member and a bunch of youth have painted that, expressed themselves, and nobody's defaced it. Nobody's put graffiti on it. Then you go to Warm Springs Market, and my brother Captain and his family, they painted that mural right next to the Warm Springs Market. Jefferson Green, he brought in Toma Villa and a bunch of youth to provide the mural at the Warm Springs Market. And today it's never been defaced. And the CAT team, and you go to the skate park, you see how we've kind of taken pride. And I've just traveled to different Native communities, how they take pride, you know, seeing Bend, maybe opening the businesses up to say, would you guys love to have a mural on your building to share the history? You go to the Dalles, you see the non-native and the natives, you see how they've put their murals together where it actually honored both communities in that way. Then you go through the Dalles and you have the old mural of Chief Tommy Thompson at the Mexican restaurant. So if you guys have time, go down to Cherry Festival in the Dalles this weekend and go look at the murals in the Dalles and truly look at the beauty of the murals. Come down to Warm Springs. Invite you down the 27th to 29th of June for the Treaty Days to witness, you know, how we celebrate through powwow, through rodeo, you know, through an endurance race where we honor the horse during that same time, the horsemanship, and as well the rodeo softball tournament. So just kind of sharing a little bit of going to different roundabouts and seeing the beauty of what city invested in murals and, you know, those roundabouts where you're actually welcomed into to Bend or to certain cities. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Any other thoughts?
I love the idea of this, and, you know, and there's a
Next
lot of
step.
other
Mhm.
opportunities that we can also explore, so. That's really.
Yeah.
Is it Highway 20 at Robal? But that's what we can talk about.
One option, so I think we had talked I think at the last meeting, or just through some informal conversations, really trying to pick a location that is a gateway coming into Bend, and that was, it seemed like a great opportunity at one of those roundabouts, but I'm really open to other thoughts.
Yeah, I think that sounds great. I would love to get the small group together if you all can spare time in your schedules to meet and talk on this and help. What we can do when we say define the scope is put the call out for artists that we want what you're talking about, right? As far as celebrating the history of the people that have been here, and making sure that's represented in whatever the gateway art is. So I think that's a great idea.
So just to clarify what Carlos's comment was, it sounds like about adding on to what we were talking about here with roundabout art. And that would be accommodated in the smaller group process that you were suggesting.
I think, well, murals are much easier than roundabout art, I think, to talk about. So I think we can.
Look at that new code.
Yeah, and we're about to update our code too, to make it easier to do murals. So I think we can, as Councilor Perkins said, sort of this is kind of the first step in maybe what's a more robust program of trying to promote art, like Carlos is describing in the city, and seeing where there are opportunities for that, for sure. Yeah. Gosh, yeah.
Suggest, we didn't mention this, that this might be nearly the last meeting for the 29th Tribal Council.
Right.
They're seating the 30th Tribal Council the first week of May. As a matter of process, maybe what we would ask to get on council's agenda with the work group idea and
Sure.
have council designate a work group, and then we could report back
That would be great.
The tribal representatives for the work group, I should say, not the whole work.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, if you want, yeah, if you're,
Yeah, okay.
yeah,
That's how it works.
and then we can sign some of our folks up and we can start meeting. I think that'd be great.
I really like the idea during this work group process, if there's a way to talk about, the roundabout art is the first step, but exploring like, well, what might some other things look like? And I mean, is there a thematic element you might develop, start working on in this first piece of roundabout art that might get replicated in other forms or locations? I mean,
Sure.
maybe too much to do in one thing, but at least talking about what the next steps might look like. I
Yeah,
think could be really valuable.
that'd be a great plan.
Counselor Riley, we've already had at least a very preliminary conversation with the old mill
Great.
because the Bill Smith's personal relationship with Warm Springs was
Yeah.
deep. And I think there's a real interest there too as well, but people are busy, right? So
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
one foot for the other.
If you, yeah, well, if we need to put our name on a letter, I'm sure we're happy to do that, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
okay. Great. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right, so our last topic to cover is regarding the Declaration of Sovereignty. Folks come up for that.
Anybody?
Yep.
And counselors who were at Bobby's presentation when we met up in Warm Springs heard a little bit about this, but I think we want to just have another chance to talk about it and how you all are working on making sure that sovereignty is acknowledged. So,
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you, thank you. Yes, this is, this document, I believe everyone has it right now.
yes.
Is a declaration of sovereignty. This is really important to the tribes. We talk about it in tribal council regularly and what it means and how important it is to the tribes to have this statement about, we're a sovereign nation. And we've always had sovereignty. It's never, the tribes have never not had sovereignty. And so before we were on a reservation and had a treaty, we were sovereigns before that. And I don't think everyone quite understands that until you start coming into these times and then start thinking about how sovereignty works with internationally and with nations and that, that's embedded in here also. And you think about the US Constitution and sovereignty and how tribes are recognized in the Constitution also. So this is a document that was worked on quite a while. Back in the 80s, they started working on this, and they had Professor Wilkinson, Charles Wilkinson, worked with the tribes in developing this and putting this together for our, there was a lot of our elder tribal council people that some of us were able to work with and know and were family, and to help put this together. And with that, maybe I'll pass over to you, Howie, about Charles Wilkinson and how he came about to help with the tribes on our tribal sovereignty. And as you can see, it's not just one page, and we tend to try not to summarize it too small because it just loses what the meaning really is. So it's we try to hand this out, but there's
Yeah, I'm Howie Arnett, one of the tribe's lawyers. I also sort of unofficial tribal historian because I go back in time a ways, representing the tribe to 1980. But I wasn't involved in this process and I knew about it. And nobody from our office, which was then called the Carnot Peterson firm, historically Owen Panner was the founder of that. But we were aware that it was happening, and I'm not exactly sure where the idea came from. I can kind of speculate. I think there's always been feeling among the tribal members and the folks. And by the way, I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like it. I teach Indian law at U of O Law School and sort of kind of some familiarity with what's going on in other tribes around the country and even in Canada and elsewhere. And I don't know of a tribe that has a declaration of sovereignty. People are writing about the tribe and about Indian people and Native people a lot, but the people themselves often don't get a chance to write about themselves and sort of express in their own words what their sovereignty is, what their view of themselves is, where they came from, and so on. And I think some of the council members at the time, and as Bobby mentioned, Charles Wilkinson, who just passed away a couple of years ago. He was a law professor at the University of Oregon. He actually is, I took his class as a third-year law student at Oregon in the late 70s. And, light bulb went off and it was a life-altering experience for me. I said, this is what I want to do. I want to do personal injury law or any of that other stuff. So he kind of channeled my career. I owe everything in my professional life to Professor Wilkinson. But Professor Wilkinson became good friends with a number of folks at Warm Springs, in particular Delbert Frank Sr., who was a council member, longtime council member from the Simnasho district, where Jay and Captain and Carlos all represent that district on council. And he wrote a book. He actually wrote 15 books in his career, not all scholarly books. In fact, most of them weren't. They were general interest books about the West and about public lands and about Indian nations. And about this time in the late 90s, he was writing a book called The Blood Struggle, the history of the modern tribal sovereignty movement. And he spent several days with Delbert Frank at Warm Springs and got to know him really well, and spent a day down at Cheers Bridge on the Deschutes, which is one of the historic and very busy tribal off-reservation fishing locations near Ty Valley. And I think maybe they came up with the idea, or Delbert came up with the idea, to have somebody channel our thoughts, our views, our explanation of who we are, where our sovereignty came from, how we express that sovereignty. And so in doing that, they didn't want to have, the Carnot, the piano firm do it, because we're just kind of involved in the day-to-day business. They wanted somebody who they could trust, number one, to really accurately reflect what they wanted said in this statement, which has got to be in English. Can't be in the native languages. This is for the world outside the tribe to see what they have to say about themselves. And they also wanted somebody who's a really good writer. And Wilkinson was a really, really good writer, beautiful writer, even though he was also a scholar and wrote lots of law review articles and so on. So he was asked to come in and do this, to hold community meetings in different parts of the reservation districts, usually in the Longhouse at Simnasho, the Longhouse at Agency, the Longhouse at Seek-Sequa, and talk to the people, hear them express their own views on how they wanted this statement of sovereignty to express what they think. And it was quite the process. It went on quite a long time, and I became good friends with Wilkinson, and he told me some interesting anecdotes about this process that he began drafting after holding some meetings. And one of the meetings, or one of the drafts, part of it, you can see it's in the third paragraph, is about the Warm Springs tribe, also called the North End or the Sahaptin or Ichuskin speaking people based in Simnasho, the Simnasho district. So he had started to draft the part of the Declaration of Sovereignty that related to the Warm Springs tribe as it distinct from the other two tribes. And so he's in the Simnasho Longhouse explaining this. And there were three women, three elders of the Simnasho Longhouse at the time, who were very well known. And in my experience, kind of ran the show at the Simnasho Longhouse. They were known as the Matilda and them. So it was Matilda Mitchell, her two sisters, Nettie Shaway and Sylvia Willilitum. And they're all Quiapamas, that's their birth names, and they married, those had different surnames. And at all the time, I went to meetings at this Simnasho Longhouse, and when this was happening, I'd probably worked with the tribe for 10 years. I never heard her speak English. She only spoke Indian, and she had an interpreter. I think she could understand English, but she just didn't want to speak it. And so Wilkinson is trying to read this thing, and he starts out by saying, the Warm Springs tribe, a Sahaptin speaking people. Oh, she says, stop. Translated to English. She wants you to stop, Professor. So he stopped. She asked the question to the translator, what is this word Sahaptin? And Wilkinson said, well, that's your language. No, that's not my language. My language is Ichuskin, which the anthropologist and linguist will tell you Sahaptin sort of describes a larger group of Columbia Plateau related languages, related to languages at Umatilla, Yakima, Nez Perce, and so on. So Wilkinson realized he screwed up right away, so he had to change that and write
Ichiski and Prince Sayapton. But it was a laborious process, but and even the statement itself, the Declaration of Sovereignty, acknowledges that this is imperfect and an expression of what we really think because it's in English, and we have to have that done. But they felt that Wilkinson would be the best person to accurately and faithfully and truly describe where they feel their sovereignty comes from, which is inherent. It's original, goes back to time immemorial. And it's a national sovereignty. It's of a group of people who, even before the contact, before the settlers came from Europe, have always freely governed themselves, and they still freely govern themselves within the limits of the federal framework in the United States. And it describes their territory and so on and so forth. So it's because it's well written, and because it faithfully, I think, expresses the views and the thoughts and the expressions of the people from the Confederated Tribes. Wilkinson did a good job, very good job.
Thank you.
Captain, were you at any of those meetings? I know you were just a wee lad those days, but.
Thank you. Yes, the ones that were held in SimNational, we were there. Again, like I shared, Jay and I know there were many others, but Jay and I sat by each other, and and I think part of the discussion why this came to be was as 1992 came when as we got the McQuinn back.
Yeah.
That was part of the discussion and the governance of that land, and as the discussion came as to sovereignty of what that meant to us. And to put it briefly, as our people talked in the home, it became layers and they peel back. What does sovereignty mean? And it is always one of the questions I ask some other people. I'll ask them, well, tell me what sovereignty means, and I'll listen to them, because most often you'll hear them talk. It's a Webster dictionary, and I'm sitting there, okay, that's not what I understand sovereignty to mean. And as they wheeled us back and peeled it back and peeled it back, and the law of the land was the thing, understanding the law of the land. And in our way, in our teaching, that law of the land comes from the way we live, the religion, the practice that we carry. That was the true law of the land. And these two young men that are here today, they both guide that services that we have. And that practice of that law of the land is what we carry forward, understanding the big law, the creation, the story of creation, and our promises made back and forth, the animals that promised themselves to us and that we promised ourselves to them. So as you go back and you think and how them old people talked, and they would talk and they'd back up, wait, and they would remember, because that's the songs, they would remember a song and they would say, well, it says this here. And then again, for us, for the Warm Springs, that was part of it. The understanding that law, our law, the law of the land, when it says sovereign, it to us, it means what that law of our creator. So it's not it's you will never find it written, our law. You won't find our songs. You can't find a songbook. It's all up here. These young men, again, like I said, they carry 100 songs just of that. But each one, if you're lucky and you learn the interpretation like they do, and then you carry it forward, it provides that teaching, that guidance. This document, again, and I believe the same thing happened in Warm Springs, was a true effort by us to define that for when somebody came and they asked us and they start telling us about sovereignty, then we would be able to lay this paper in front of them. This is how some of us feel. Again, it doesn't tell you everything, but it tells you enough that Webster's isn't always right. It isn't our interpretation of sovereignty.
Mm-hmm.
So we're to remind everybody in that law, and to take it a different direction. One time, as we walk up and down that river, as we hear them songs, We know that our sovereign is there. We can go downriver, we can go upriver, we go across the river. The same songs are there. So we know that they believe the same way we do. Go to Yakima, you go to Umatilla. This person's different because theirs is a little bit different. But it's the same belief that the Creator put us here, gave us that direction. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mayor, just some context
Sure.
and would encourage Captain or anyone really. The whole reason for really having this discussion was the city had asked if your land acknowledgement, the tribe considered it to be appropriate. And it actually provoked a larger discussion about is any land acknowledgement appropriate? And what I've heard, and Bobby can share this as much as anyone, is that is my view, and I'm corrected all the time, so they're being nice to me today, but if we're in council chambers, it might be a different story, but in how he's talked about the history of land acknowledgements, which really started in Australia and New Zealand and sort of was brought to North America, was that by definition, they're almost too constrained because they're just talking about the historical connection to territory in a way that it doesn't allow for the opportunity for the current contemporary connection in the current sovereignty that Warm Springs has. And so what we've begun to discuss with council is the idea of taking the Declaration of Sovereignty and pairing it with maybe a council supported policy. We may not get there, that would for institutions and entities like the city would be to say, if you wanted to do something, we would prefer an acknowledgement of our sovereignty as we understand it. And then that way it would demonstrate that you sort of heard the tribe and how it views itself rather than just adopt a land acknowledgement. Is that correct? I think.
Seeing nodding heads.
Yeah.
Thank
So
you,
we're-
Josh. Oh, Carlos had his hand up.
Yeah, I'm thankful Josh brought that up. You know, as we, I'm 54, I'll be 55 next month. From birth to, I guess, to you leave this world, this earth, as an acknowledgement, just like I said when I said my Indian name, the land acknowledges that, knows who I am, knows where I come from. That, you know, land acknowledgements, they asked me to do one at the Redmond Airport, and it was hard to do because it's telling a history in one way, but then again, we've never left here. We still have the relationship with the land. The land has a relationship with us. The gifts that are given to us on our lands, our ceded lands, those things they're not written on paper. We call it Enchi Tamanwit, the big law that we live by each day. And we try to teach our children and grandchildren. And I always tease Howie, he's been here since time immemorial, you know, being the eldest.
I should have
of
done a
our-
better job.
Something that it's a way of life that hopefully you as a city council and the future city councils, because as I spoke the other day, my great grandfather sat on council in the 40s. My grandmother through the 50s, 70s, and 80s. My father served one term, and then myself. For us to continue to express how important the sovereignty is, and that you as a city council, many of the people here in Bend, when I came to that Water Conservancy evening, the meeting they had it here in Bend, they asked for a show of hands of how many people are actually Bend, natives of Bend. I think there's only 3 out of about 60. So there's a lot of people that need to be educated within Bend and Deschutes County, because majority of Jefferson County are people moving in from Idaho to Madras, Culver, Metolius, Prineville. So it's mainly educating the new people that are moving here, the importance of the sovereignty of the ceded lands of the people that, you know, we're still here. We're going to be here tomorrow. We're going to be here 100 years from now, 1,000 years from now, that we still honor those that have put forth for us. And my grandmother is one of the signatures. I think 6 of the 7 that signed were traditionalists back then that knew the unwritten laws and the chairman being the first signature. So out of those 11, there's 7 that have signed. And I'm really thankful to many of those that have put forth to this declaration of sovereignty, because there's no other tribe in the state of Oregon. And they can't say, well, we have a declaration of sovereignty. No, Warm Springs is the only tribe that stepped forward and has a declaration of sovereignty. I wouldn't want another tribe to try and shadow and use this declaration of the Warm Springs people. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlos. Yeah. Any other thoughts on this topic? I think we look forward to hearing more about your work on this and appreciate even spending time thinking about how to advise us about this. I think we just really appreciate that. We want to do right and recognize you how you want to be recognized. So. Okay.
And I think, as you probably know, we've paused, we're not using the land acknowledgement that we had written and had some input from you all on, and I think we're looking forward to getting some more guidance on what would be appropriate going forward in this issue. How we get at the sovereignty seems very important.
Yeah, and how we can educate folks,
Right.
even folks who grew up in Bend maybe don't know enough,
Right.
right? So I think we can educate everybody. Yeah. Okay.
Well, I really appreciate you all taking the time to really explain the history of this and what it means. And so thank you. Thank you for.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that was the last item on our agenda. So unless anyone has anything else, we're ending right on time. Amazing. But I'll have time to hang out and chat some more with you before you head back up. Really appreciate you traveling to us. And appreciate you having a meal with us, and we will plan to travel to you for our next meeting. So we'll do that. All right. I think we're adjourned.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, great.